Hi lovelies, it's MLP with Lovely Lulu Designs, and in this video I will be showing you how to make this Christmas Overkill foil texture distressed geode 3-color glitter drip coffee mug. I will be using a number of different materials and techniques, including tissue paper and metallic foils to build the base texture, the smoke method for the waterslide background, and Nice and Thick by CCDIY for the glitter drips. As always, I will link supplies in the description section of the video. Without any further ado, let's get started. So to start with, what we want to do is we want to build some texture on the base of our cup. And I've got here a fully prepped tumbler. It's a 14-ounce coffee mug, the one with like the little kind of like pot belly and the rounded off handle. People have been asking where I get my tumblers from. In full disclosure, I have been ordering direct from manufacturer in bulk from the beginning, ever since I started doing tumblers, because in Canada it used to be just so expensive to purchase them from the States or anywhere else. However, there are now some really great cup suppliers for Canadians. So if you are looking for someone, I know for a fact DAHT carries the 14-ounce potbelly sort of coffee mugs with that rounded off handle. And these are a really nice size, and they're a big hit with my customers. They sell really, really well, and it's a nice shape for what we're going to be doing today. So a fully prepped tumbler is one that is being sanded, cleaned, and primed. Today I used a black primer because I'm going to be doing a black base on my tumbler. I guess it doesn't really matter too much because we are going to be painting this again, but what we need to be doing is we need to be building some texture on here first. So in order to build the texture, we are going to be using some tissue paper. So I just have, again, your tissue paper color does not matter. So what I'm going to do is I want to maintain some straight sides for my tissue paper. So I'm just going to take a pair of scissors and I'm just going to cut it so I can have these straight sides. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of rip it where maybe I need to, if it's too big, on that seam here, do a better job than I will probably. I don't want to seam to rip straight. There we go. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tissue paper and I'm just going to crinkle it all up. You want to abuse and use your tissue paper. And then I'm going to open it up again. And then I'm going to crinkle it some more, just to get as much crinkly texture from this as I possibly can. And the next thing that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to start pulling them open. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be decoupaging these onto my tumbler. So I'm going to be using Mod Podge. I'm just going to put a little bit into a dish. And you're not too concerned about brush strokes here because we are going to be putting the tissue paper on. But we're just going to put a pretty good coat of the Mod Podge on, just like you would if you were doing fabric. And also, just like you would if you were doing fabric, you're going to want to try to leave a little bit of a rim, which is why I wanted to have that straight edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of place it down. Oh, maybe not this side. Place it down while still leaving just a little bit of a rim on that tumbler. And then I'm just going to pat it down. So what I'm not doing is I'm not smoothing it out because I want to maintain that sort of crinkly texture that you see coming on here. I want to make sure when I'm doing this that I don't have anything that's really sticking up or no air bubbles underneath it. If you do, it's going to be a problem later. It's going to be a weak part in your design. And if the tumbler is dropped, or even just over time, potentially, if it's not handled properly, it could start separating from its backing, and you don't want to have that happen. So what I'm basically doing is I'm just dabbing down without smoothing it up. So that way I'm getting rid of any air trap behind it, making sure I have good adhesion, and making sure I'm not smoothing or tearing my tissue paper. When you're layering, you're going to find that you're sometimes going to have to layer directly over top of the tissue paper that you've already laid down. So what you'll do then is you'll take your Mod Podge and you'll kind of dab it rather than brush it. You're just going to dab it so you're not tearing that wet tissue paper, which is going to be very fragile. And then from here, what you're going to do is you're just going to dab that back on. And if you find that once you've laid it down that you're missing a spot, like there's not enough glue there, just peel it back a little bit, dab a little more glue on, and pat it down, just like that. So I'm going to go around the entire tumbler, and I'm just going to repeat this process. And the nice thing is that because you're looking for texture, you can overlap it, you can rip it into smaller pieces, you can use larger pieces. You're really just looking to cover the entire surface area. So basically, this is sort of where I'm talking about air being trapped underneath. I don't know if you could see that air bubble that was like right here. So I just kind of press that out, that little air bubble out. And you'll see them, like you'll know them when you see them. You're gonna go, oh, okay, that's what that looks like, if you can't tell from the camera. So that's not glued down, so I'm just going to peel it back, add a little bit of glue, and then put it on. And just to show you the handle really quickly as well, because that can be, like a bit of a trickier spot, what you're going to do is you're just going to use some smaller pieces of the tissue paper to make it easier to wrap it. And as your glue starts to dry on your fingers, it might get a little bit sticky, but you're just going to take it, put some Mod Podge on, make sure you're wrapping it around the entire handle. If you miss a little section here or there, and you just kind of can't fill it, you don't like how it looks if you fill it, that's not going to be a big deal, because we are going to be covering it. Just kind of try to make a mental note that maybe, underneath the handle, I wasn't able to fill it the way I wanted to, so don't geode away at that section, if that happens. So as you can see, I just kind of put it there, wrapped it on, dabbed it down just like I did in the other section. And then I'm going to do the same here on the inside of the handle. And you can crinkle this up as much as you want, whenever you want. You can also put down 2 coats of the tissue paper. You can, after your first coat has dried and you kind of look at it, if there's just a couple sections, you can do just a couple sections. It's really up to how you want it to look. So again, here I'm going to be overlapping my tissue paper, so it doesn't have any Mod Podge on it. So I just dab some on and put it in the handle there like that. So I'm just going to try to show you guys how that looks. You can see it. So I have this part here is also kind of sticking up a little bit. So I can either tear that away, which is another nice thing that you can do if you're having like one section that, you find it's too much tissue paper there. You can also tear that away. This part of the process is really, really easy. Unlike fabric, you're not worried about it laying flat or straight or anything like that. You're just looking for full coverage and for lots and lots of crinkly texture. So I'm going to finish going around my tumbler. Like I said, I might need to do a couple coats here and there. Like you can see here where I've layered it. It's got a little bit more texture than where I don't have it layered. It's going to be a little bit higher up. So that's kind of a nice effect. So it's up to you how many coats you want to do. But I'm going to continue going around my tumbler, finish this up, and then I will show you guys my next step. Okay, so my tumbler is completely covered in the tissue paper. There was a couple areas where I doubled up. As you can see, it's a little bit thicker with the green here. When I said that it doesn't matter what color tissue paper you use, that's totally true. However, I do like to use a contrasting color of tissue paper to the base coat of paint that I have on here, just to kind of make it easier to see what coverage that I have. So that might be something that you want to do as well. But the color of contrast that you choose, if you so decide to do it that way, doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do now, the Mod Podge is pretty thick on here. I'm going to give it a chance to dry before I want to seal it, so that way I don't tear my tissue paper or move it out of areas like where I've placed it. So you're also going to notice that I have some areas on my rim where I didn't cover it. That's going to be okay too, because we're going to be doing chocolate drips on it like this. So basically it's fine to have just a little bit of a rim. I'd rather have a little bit of a rim here than have paper come up and over, because I can't get a proper seal then. So just make sure that everything is pressed down really well. You don't have any parts sticking up. There's no bubbles. And once this is fully dried, I'm going to come back in with some more Mod Podge, and I'm going to do 2 to 3 coats. With fabric, I would usually do 4 to 5, but fabric is thicker, so it's going to absorb more. This isn't going to need quite as much, and my coats are going to be a little bit heavier because I'm not really too concerned about if it dries cloudy or not, because again, we're going to be spray painting this. So what I'm going to be doing next, I'm not going to show you guys on camera. I'm going to seal this with 2 to 3 coats of Mod Podge. Then I'm going to spray paint it black, because I want to have a black base. You are going to be kind of concerned about drips, so if you are having some issues with spray painting without drips, I do recommend checking out my video on how to do that without drips. I will link it here for you. It's twice that you're going to need to do that for this tumbler, so definitely check it out if that's something you're having a hard time with, or if you're new to my channel and you maybe don't have as much experience with it. So that's enough for right now. I will be back to show you guys the next step. Here's what it looks like after it's been spray painted black. So you can see some of that nice texture in there from the tissue paper that's been decoupaged on. I want to do a quick shout out right now to Roxy Adcock of Glitter and Rust. She is a mixed media master, and her the effects that she got on some of her mixed media masterpieces really were things that I was trying to achieve. So I picked her brain, and she told me how she did it. And you know, she kind of helped me out with how we would do it on a tumbler, and I think it looks really, really cool. So Roxy, you rock. Thank you so much. So this is where we are so far. So we've got that texture on it, was sealed with Mod Podge, and then it's being spray painted black. As you can see, I don't have any drips on it, and that is important for this part because we are going to see the texture. So what we're going to be doing is, I forgot to pull them out right now, so I'll have to grab them in a second, but we're going to be coloring this with the chameleon flakes again. So if you have seen my Whirlpool Mermaid tutorial, the way that I do that is I apply Tack-It, and that's a repositionable glue which dries tacky, and then that allows us to burnish the chameleon flakes on and give us some nice color shift and some nice texture. So right now I've got my Tack-It in this little container. I usually mix my Tack-It, I kind of eyeball it, anywhere between 50-50 water to Tack-It ratio to a 75 Tack-It 25 water ratio should be somewhere that will get you good adhesion and good coverage. I think when I eyeball it, it's probably closer to 60-40. When you put it if you put it in an airtight container like I do, it'll last for quite a while, but the water and the glue will separate. So you just need to kind of go back in with some type of stir stick and just kind of mix the two back together again. Again, because Tack-It dries tacky, you're going to want to make sure that you do clean this guy off well. It's kind of sticky on the edges there too, because I don't want to have this be sticky on me. So I just take either some acetone or some alcohol. I have always 99.9% or 99%, whichever. And you just kind of wipe it like that, and then this is clean. I'm going to be using my Taklon brush, which I always use. I get these on Amazon, and I'm just going to dip my brush into here and start spreading it on. And when you start spreading this on, you're going to see that texture that we've been building. It kind of is a lot easier to see right now when it's kind of highlighted by the glue like that. One of the nice things with Tack-It when you're applying it, because we've diluted it, a little does go a long way, but also it kind of changes the color, especially if you're doing it on a dark like black. So you can see if you've missed anything. And this is going to be especially important with the texture because we want to make sure that we've gotten the glue into all of the ridges. We don't have any pure black spots. And then we know this will be dry because it's going to dry clear again. So you won't be able to see it. So a lot happened in the last half an hour while I was waiting for this to dry, which you can now see has gone back to its black color, and if I touch it, I feel that it is tacky. So if you're touching it and noticing that it's not really tacky, I would recommend going back and putting on a second coat. It just basically means then that you've probably added too much water in your mixture. But when I was waiting for this to dry, I dropped my kids off at school and I went to my mailbox, and there was this M&Cat package there just waiting for me, and I picked it up, and we have a bit of a change of plan. I have been waiting for these metallic foil flakes for some time. Amy put in the order a long time ago, and the labels were ready first, and then the flakes came out next, and I am so excited. So here she has different colors of the metallic foil flakes. I'll just kind of show you guys what came in. I got one of each. So these are the silver foil flakes, the gold foil flakes, red variegated foil flakes, the green, we have mixed, we have blue, and we have copper, and they are all stunning. Like I actually can't pick a favorite. I love all of them, but we're doing a Christmas theme. And I find that the green, while green is a Christmas color, it is a little bit more geared towards like a patina kind of green than it is like a Christmas green. So you can kind of see all those beautiful colors in there. So this is more like patina, distressed, vintage, which speaks to my soul. I have a vintage soul. And I absolutely love that color, but it's not really Christmas. So I've decided that we're going to go with the red foil flakes, the gold foil flakes. I got this gold leaf paper or metallic leafing paper. One side is gold and one side is red. I got these off of Amazon, so I'll put the link in for that as well. And I thought that this would add some nice like pure red or gold kind of. We'll see how it works. We're going to kind of play. We're going to start here. Now that my tumbler is tacky, I don't really want to be touching the tumbler itself necessarily. It can make a bit of a mess then, or just kind of uncomfortable on my skin. So we're going to start by adding some of the flakes here and seeing how this looks. We're going to play a little bit. So I'm just going to take some tweezers and I'm just going to pick up a piece of the flake. I will put it on the tumbler, and I'm just going to kind of burnish it on. And you're going to notice right away that it starts to pick up that texture underneath it. And we're going to do another piece, and I'm just going to kind of scatter them a little bit. And again, because you're looking for texture here, doesn't matter if it kind of overlaps a little bit. It's going to give you some nice, interesting coloring. So just going to kind of repeat that process of just picking pieces up and burnishing it on. And then I'm maybe going to add a little bit of gold here and there. So by doing this and kind of just sort of filling around the smaller areas first, then I can go with my larger sheet and fill in whatever I missed, or you know, like wherever I want to add it to with the larger sheet. If I did the larger sheet first, basically what would happen is I'd fill the entire tumbler with that. It would make it a lot harder to do. So this is a good order of how to do that. I was kind of thinking that would be the case, but it's nice to know sometimes that when you predict things, they work out the way you plan. So that actually looks pretty darn good. I've got my full coverage. It almost kind of looks like wrapping paper, which is kind of neat. And another nice thing about when you do it the way that I did by like rolling it, is that it tears the edges, so you're not just getting like square shapes on here. You get these like nice irregular sort of shapes on here. It makes it look a lot more natural. As I was looking at my tumbler, I decided I do want to add a little bit of green here and there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more of a repositionable glue, or in this case here, I'm going to use my Speedball metal flake adhesive. You can use your Tack-It. I'm just going to use this because I have it out right now and I don't have to mix it. So I found another sheet of green foil, so I'm going to use this color here. Again, I haven't used this color yet, but it's a very nice Christmassy green. And what I'm going to do is I have this brush. It's been determined by me and my friends that I don't really girl very well. And this came with, I think, like makeup brushes that I bought, ironically, for crafting. And I think this is for eyebrows. I mean, that would be what my guess would be. So it has this nice little brush, which, I mean, it kind of looks like a mascara brush to me, but I'm assuming this is for eyebrows. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to apply my adhesive. So I'm going to take it and I'm just going to dip it into my adhesive. And I don't want it to have too much. So I'm going to kind of scrape off a little bit on the sides. I just kind of want to have a little bit. And I'm going to pick and choose on this tumbler sort of where I want to have some of my green, and I'm just going to use this brush to kind of brush some on. And so if you add too much to your brush and you're using something like this to try to get the effect that I'm hoping to get, what's going to happen is it's all just going to run together and you're not really going to get as distressed as what you maybe would like. So I'm just going to add a little bit here and there, maybe a little bit to my handle. This is pretty gold. And just kind of hit a few spots. And then I'm going to let this dry. So this is again about 15 minutes, I'd say, to dry. Right now you can kind of see that it's a little bit cloudy. Oh, maybe you can't see, but I can see that areas where the adhesive was a little thicker is a little bit cloudy. When it dries, I'm not going to be able to see it all. So I'm going to show you just how I apply it, even though I can't see where it needs to go. Okay, so my adhesive has dried, so it's sticky. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my piece of foil and I'm just going to kind of dab it on the tumbler, and that's going to be basically how I'm going to figure out where I had put the adhesive. And then you can see here that it's just a small amount that gets added. So I don't want to overpower with the green. I'm really just looking to add a couple accents of the green here and there. And you can be a little rough with how you're burnishing it, because it's going to give you sort of some of that textured look to it that you see there. So I'm going to add just a little bit more the same way I did before. I'm not going to show you guys that part. You just watched me do it. So basically my next step after I'm going to add that to here is I'm going to seal this with, actually first I will take a rough brush and I will just try to kind of knock out anything that's maybe around the handle or that's loose that I didn't get off before, just really quickly. To make it easier for me when I do my epoxy, because I don't want to have these little pieces sticking up in there and making it a rough surface. What I need to achieve next is going to be a smooth epoxy surface on this. So for me, I get the smoothest after a flood coat. So I know from experience that if I just do one coat plus a flood coat, I'm still not going to have a perfectly flat surface, and I'm going to need to do it again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one normal coat of epoxy, a light sand, and then I'm going to do a thin coat followed 3 hours later by a flood coat. my reasoning for that is because I get the smoothest, flawless coat, like most flawless coats, when I'm doing it off of a flood coat. I do have a video on how I do a flood coat, which I will link here if you're not familiar with how to do that. I'm not going to cover it again in this video though, just for purposes of length. It's already going to be another longer video because of the number of steps. So if you are unsure how to do that, check that video out and just follow those steps. So basically what I'm going to do, add a little bit more green right here, then I'm going to seal it with quick coat and epoxy this until it is smooth. I forgot to mention here that I will also be spray painting my tumbler first black and then white. You will need to be careful for drips at this stage as well. Before I get started too much into my next step, I just want to kind of walk you guys through my design process because it changed quite a few times, my intention for this tutorial. Originally, my intention was to recreate this tumbler here. So you can see I started off with the same kind of texture, but as soon as I colored it with the foil instead of the flakes, and I sort of looked at that coloring, my design kind of took a total different turn and I envisioned something completely different for the tumbler. So because this is going to be an RTS tumbler on my page, I don't have a customer, so I'm not trying to make something that my customer is expecting. I have a lot of freedom in how I want to do the design. So I was originally, like I said, going to do this one here with the gray wood grain, the black knots, and the hot chocolate drips. I'm still going to do some things. I'm still going to do distressed geode, but I'm not going to do the wood grain for this tutorial anymore. I'm going to do another one shortly, I promise you, because I know I've had a lot of people asking me how I do my knots. And I'm still going to do a drip cup, but it's not going to be a chocolate drip anymore. So basically, I was also going to do something either like the old-fashioned sleigh rides that I have on my Etsy shop, or my hot chocolate design that I have on my Etsy shop. But again, when I sort of saw how my coloring on my texture came together, I had a total other vision for it. So I've changed my mind a number of times on how I'm going to do it. And I no longer want to do it as a wood grain. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be making it into a Christmas Overkill tumbler. So I have my tumbler here. This is the one that I've been working on. I didn't quite get a perfectly smooth epoxy finish before I spray painted. However, because I am going to be distressing it, I'm not worried about it because I can just pull the paint away from that section. What I needed to make sure though, that was where I was going to be putting my design, like my decal, was smooth, and it was. So because of that, I decided to go ahead and paint it. Anyway, I don't want to make it too thick, but you can see here, for instance, I have like a little divot. So I'll just kind of pull that paint color away there when I'm distressing it, so you won't see that. I have it here on the handle as well. So I decided not really to worry about it, and there's a little bit up here too, but again, this is going to be a drip cup, so I'm not worried about how perfectly smooth that's going to be at this point either. So because I'm doing this as Christmas Overkill, the wood grain sort of felt too nice for it, really. I kind of wanted to do something a little more random, a little more like where I'm not controlling the texture as much. So I also, the idea of Christmas Overkill for me is kind of like you just burn the whole house down. So I was thinking I would do the smoke effect. So the smoke effect has been around for a while. I first saw it done by Jeanette Hernandez on, I think it was on YouTube where I watched it. So basically all that you need is you need to have a candle. You need to have something to make your smoke black. So you're going to want to use a metal surface. So I just have this old knife here that I only use for this. I don't use it for anything but making my smoke black. I've heard that tiki torches work quite well because they already, you know, kind of emit a black smoke. So that's me. I haven't tried it, but if you have tiki torches, I've heard that they work really, really well for this process. And all that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be lighting my candle, putting my knife underneath that, and allowing it to build up some smoke, and then I am going to be putting my tumbler over top of it to catch that smoke. I think I'm going to change my camera angle right now, so it might be easier for you guys to see. I'm kind of worried that if I do it from up above, the smoke is just going to block what we're going to view. So I'm going to switch that out now, and I'm going to show you how I do it. But if you're looking for a full tutorial on the smoke method, definitely check out that video by Jeanette Hernandez. It was really well done. Okay, so I'm going to start off by lighting my candle. And then, as I said, you need to put your knife into the flame in order to produce that black smoke. So I'm going to see if I can get you guys to sort of see it in the camera. I don't know if you can see that, the smoke there, but that's what this, the purpose for this knife going into the flame is for. You're going to want to keep your tumbler on the arm, like a football arm or something like that, so it's easier to maneuver, and so you're not getting yourself too close to the flame, or your blade if you're using a sharp blade like me. Please be safe when you're doing this. You know, you are working with fire and sharp tools, so just be careful. So I'm going to start by putting my knife in the flame, and then what I want to do is I want to start rotating my tumbler over top of that black smoke in order to catch it. And I'm basically just staining my primer, because I used a primer here, with the smoke. And you can do this over top of epoxy, you can do it over top of other surfaces as well. In case you're wondering, I've done glitter epoxy and then the smoke effect on top of that, and it does work. Don't forget to do your bottoms. The closer you get to the flame, the more concentrated your smoke is going to be and the darker it's going to be. You can build up your color. You can look at it and say, I want it to be light, I want it to be darker. It's really personal preference here, but this produces some really nice natural organic results, which I really like. It's you know, like it's smoke, so it's chaotic, it's beautiful, and it just kind of, that chaotic, uncontrolled look was really what I wanted to go for here, with my Christmas Overkill theme that I was kind of thinking on. Just coming in over it, moving back and forth, rotating, allowing the smoke and my own movements to just sort of make its own pattern and design. I'm going to do a little more on the bottom. And you can get different effects too. Like if you, for instance, want to have more of the smoke kind of swooshing up, you can put your candle here and then have your tumbler sort of vertically come in, and it will allow it to sort of catch just coming up and over that ridge. Or you can trap it this way horizontally. It'll give you different looks. So just sort of play around with it until you get a look and feel that you like. If you have your tumbler further away, it'll be more wispy, it will be lighter, closer, darker, and more concentrated. Okay, so I don't want to burn myself. So I'm pretty happy with this. I think this looks really good. So what I'm going to want to do next is I'm going to want to seal my smoke on the spray paint. And the reason for that is because I'm going to be pulling it away, like pulling the paint away with acetone and with alcohol. But if that runs, it's just going to wipe and smear my smoke, and I don't want that to happen. I want to make sure that I've sealed that on there first. I did try doing this with just brush on. If you guys have seen my other videos, you know that my sealer of choice is a brush on. It is Quick Coat by CCDIY. Again, if you're in Canada, this is only available through M&Cat Glitter Factory here. There are other places in the States which do sell it, but if you are in Canada, that is where you need to go to get it. Amy is amazing, and she has a whole bunch of different CCDIY products, so definitely check them out. It's a brand that I absolutely love. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to spray seal it, because when I use the brush on sealer, what ends up happening is it kind of made the smoke run a little bit, and I had brush streaks in the smoke. It kind of took away that nice patterning that I have here and kind of added some brush texture, and I didn't really like that. That wasn't what I was going for this. So I'm going to do 2 coats of spray sealer. I just use Rust-Oleum 2 times, either satin. I prefer satin. That's my one of choice. But you can use satin or gloss, or even matte if you want to. That's not going to be a big deal. So basically, I'm going to do that, 2 coats of that, and then it will come in with the quick coat, and I will do 1 coat of this to make sure that it is well sealed on there. And then I'm going to show you guys the process of distressing it. My tumbler has been sealed with the 2 coats of spray sealer and the 1 coat of quick coat on my brush on sealer. You can use all coats of spray sealer if that's what you prefer. You can also use Minwax polyacrylic instead of the quick coat. It will work as well. It's a little bit thinner, but in this case here, unlike with some of the chunkier glitters or like with the papers like the mermaid scales, it's not going to matter if it's thin or not. So if you want, you can use those as well. Just make sure that your first 2 coats is with a spray sealer, so that way you're not accidentally smudging any of your smoke that's on your tumbler. So my next step is going to be to start distressing this and to reveal some of the texture and the color that we have underneath on this Christmas Overkill tumbler. So I'm going to be using my Christmas Overkill Skull Girl with the Christmas scene reflected in the glasses and the poinsettia in her hair. This is available on my Etsy shop, so I am going to be linking it. I'm also going to add, I haven't fully decided yet, but I think I'm going to add just Christmas Overkill to the back. This file comes like this, or as well as with one that has Christmas Overkill on the top and bottom. You could use that as well, but because it's a drip cup, I didn't want to have the writing above and below it. I wanted to just sort of have her. So I'm going to make another file of just Christmas Overkill, and I'm going to make that one as an SVG so I can cut it with vinyl. And I'm going to include an offset with it, so then that way if you are going to do something like this and you've got contrasting colors and you need to put an offset, it'll be available in the file. So I haven't made that yet. I'm going to make that today, and then I'll show you guys when I apply it. So in order to kind of decide where I want to distress it, I first have to decide where I want to put my water slide. So to do that, if you watched my Skull Damask tutorial, you know that I use my lids for measuring. So it's a little bit different on a coffee mug lid. It has this ability to open and close by turning these little, I guess, little handles here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure my lid is fully open, and then I'm going to take my fully open lid and I'm going to line up this mark here with my handle. And this way I know that I've got it on straight. And then for this design, if you've seen before, I would usually fold my design in half to kind of see the middle part. But because of the way that this is designed, the poinsettia leaf kind of makes it so that it's the center would not be the center of her face. The center would be off to the side. And I want to center it up with her face. So I'm going to be kind of using the nose or the center mark of the glasses to kind of help guide me. And it's going to be about here where I would put her. So I'm going to kind of make a mental note of this and sort of look around. I have quite a bit of space here that I'm able to distress. So that's kind of good for me to know. So this sort of just helps with my visualization before I get started. And then if I want to, I can always pop this back on again. And as I'm sort of going, I can place her here just to kind of make sure that I'm not going too far in, or that I've kind of taken away as much as I want to. So I'm going to take off my lid. You don't want to leave your lid on, because if you get acetone on your lid, you can ruin your lid. So we're just going to put this to the side. Now when we're distressing, I use a couple different things. I'll use a bunch of Q-tips for some smaller areas that I maybe want to do, and I'll also use just regular paper towel. And for the actual distressing part, we need acetone. I have to remark this, but this is my acetone, and this is my alcohol, and I'm using 99% isopropyl alcohol. So basically, I've had people, I've seen a lot of people, and I've also had people ask me personally questions with why you would use both acetone and the alcohol. So the acetone does a really good job stripping your paint away. The alcohol does a nice job sort of cleaning it up. And if you want to take away just a little bit without taking away all of the paint, so say I wanted to just sort of take away some of that smoke, I would probably do that more with the alcohol, because it's easier to control than it is with the acetone. So we're going to start with the acetone. And I'm just going to, you might also want to glove up. You're going to be dealing with chemicals here, and also it does get kind of messy. And I'm just going to put my hand in my tumbler, and the first places that I want to start distressing are where I had those divots in my paint, because I know that for sure that I want to strip the divots in the epoxy, because I know for sure I want to strip the paint away from there so I can hide that in my next coat of epoxy. So I'm just going to start rubbing, and you're going to notice the first thing I do is I get through my sealer, then I rub off the smoke, and then as I keep going, I'm getting rid of the white paint, and behind that is the black paint. And that kind of helps to give you that distressed look, having that black paint in there. You can kind of clean up as much as you want using the acetone. You want to be a little bit cautious on your edges, or you can, I kind of like the look of a bit of a cleaner white section around it. If you don't want to have that, you just have to be a little more specific and careful with where you're kind of pulling that paint away to sort of bring that line in. And this is why we seal it so well, because if you don't seal it, that smoke is just going to clean up off the white so easily, and you're not really going to want that. So you're just going to kind of pick a shape that you want to pick, and then you're going to see here that I've got these gray marks here, and that's from that black paint underneath. And this is where the alcohol comes in handy. And also you might still see a little bit on here. So basically what you'll do with your alcohol is you'll just put some on your cloth, and then you'll clean up those areas there. So you're just using the alcohol to clean off some of that last of the paint. And then if you wanted to, you don't like, say you didn't like all of this white here on the outside, you would just come in with a little bit more acetone and smaller movements to kind of clean it up a little bit more and bring your edge a little more out. If you need more specific, so say I wanted to make this a little bit of a sharper, I like to use the Q-tips for this. Some people are pretty good at using just their fingertips and the tip of a paper towel, but I really like to just kind of go in with a Q-tip, and I can kind of make some more precise geodes that way. When you're doing this, you don't need a ton of product. A little will go a long way. And I say that because if you have a ton of product and it starts dripping, it might pull away color or sealer where you don't want it to. So just put enough to kind of wet it, but not soak it so it's not running down. Okay, so there's one there. And then again, if I wanted to remind myself of where my water slide was going, I would just pop my lid back on, straighten that up, kind of look at the nose and there. And I actually still have plenty of space, so I might even come out a little further there. So work slow, build your shapes, and take small amounts at a time, because you can always take more, but it's a lot harder to take less. Like, you can't really add it back unless you were to respray paint it, and that's never fun. On the handle, I'll show you what I'm going to kind of do on the handle here. I know I have a section where my handle was kind of flawed. I think it was like here and here. So I like to use more my Q-tips for the handle and just kind of pull away smaller amounts here. I like to remember that the handle wraps in as well. So maybe if I'm taking from here, because I've got some texture sort of showing through here on my paint, I might take this section and even like wrap it into the inner part of the handle. So there we have it. All right, now I'm going to pull a little more off the handle. So I'm going to keep going on this. And then once I'm done, I'll sort of show you. I'm going to concentrate around the bottom rim here. I like to take a lot of the paint off around the bottom rim. I always remember to do some bottom as well. And I'm going to pull more paint off on the back than I am on the front, obviously, because that's where my decal is going to be. So I'm going to continue doing this process, and I will show you when I am done. It is now completely geoded. I'm happy with what I've done. I've taken some bits from the handle. I've taken more off of the back. I've taken some from the sides. I did pull a little bit away where the flower is going to be because for me, I like just a little bit of pulled away paint underneath my decal. If the design isn't 100% necessary to be seen, like so say it's not writing or something, like this is just a graphic. And the reason why I like that is just because I find it looks a little bit more natural. Now, in most cases, what I would do at this point is I would have put on a coat of epoxy and then I would have put on my water slide. However, this is already getting to be a bit of a thicker cup, so to kind of reduce the number of layers of epoxy, I have had success by using a coat of Quick Coat. This is a high gloss sealer, and it doesn't really show the brush strokes. I haven't had an issue with that, especially when I'm using the Taklon brushes that I show you guys, which I get on Amazon. So I've just been putting down a coat of Quick Coat, and then the this surface wasn't sanded first, so I'm not really worrying about sand marks or anything like that underneath not being filled. So this has sort of worked out for me in the past. So that's what we're going to do again today. We're going to just put my decal, or sorry, my water slide on here. I'm going to again use my lid as reference, and I just want to mention the water slide paper that I'm using. So before I was using water slide, this water slide paper, should I say, I tried a few other brands, mostly ones that I got off of Amazon. I did not like them. I stopped using them altogether. I really had a hard time getting them not to tear. I have a laser printer, so I use laser paper, and it didn't seem to matter. Like, I didn't have to seal them, so I don't know, it just didn't seem to want to apply properly. And then I found it was like really thin and it would be tearing. So I read somewhere that you could put a sealer on it and it would work better for you. So I tried that. And honestly, it didn't really help. I just didn't like it. So I would have issues with tearing. I would have issues with bubbles. It just wasn't a good match for me. So I'd switch to tattoo paper. Now there's a couple cons with tattoo paper. While it is very similar to the water slide paper, it is more expensive than your water slide is, and it also comes in two parts. You have to mirror the image first when you print it, then you have an adhesive paper that you need to put on it. You need to burnish it really well, and then after that you can cut it out and you can apply it face down. Then you put your water on just like you would a temporary tattoo on your body. The other thing is that on a curved surface it was not nearly as flexible because it had that paper backing, so I wouldn't have been able to do a design like this, this size, on this kind of curve. I'm already not the greatest when it comes to technique because I am newer to using water slides since I just switched off of the tattoo, but I have to say that this water slide paper is amazing. It is a lot thicker. It's a lot easier to work with. I really like it. I haven't had any issues with tearing with it. It holds the color of the ink, or toner, should I say, very well. I get my water slide paper from Newfound Finishes. Amanda Paul, I believe I'm saying that correctly. I did ask her for pronunciation. She's now starting to sell blank sheets of her water slide paper. She also sells pre-made designs, but she only sells the laser and the clear at this point. I don't know if she's going to change that later. I believe it's $1.35 a sheet for the paper. I'm not 100% sure, but it is quality paper. This one here, for instance, I put it on originally on this tumbler before I put anything on it to see if I could even do this design with this shape cup in this size, and I didn't have an issue, so I just peeled it off and I put it back on the backing paper. So this has actually been used and I'm going to reuse it, and I haven't had an issue with it tearing, so that's pretty exciting. So I'm just going to show you how to do this. Again, I'm not the best when it comes to this. You might have a technique that works better for you, and that's great. I'm going to put it in upside down to help prevent with it curling too much, and you're just putting it in some water. This is room temperature water. I've just had it kind of sitting here for a little while, and you're just going to put it in your water for I don't know, 30 seconds or so, when you start noticing it kind of lifting off of the backing paper, you know it's ready. Not quite. So I do wet the surface of my tumbler a little bit just to make it a little bit easier to kind of move it around if so needed. It's ready now. Okay. So again, I'm going to use the lid of my tumbler as my reference point, and this looks to be about center. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit on the tumbler because I'm going to be doing a drip cup, so I want to have just a little bit of space to allow for some drips. I won't do my drip as heavy where her hair is. And I kind of just figure out my placement more or less before I pull out the backing paper. And I'm just going to hold it on the one side and slide that backing paper out. Now what you're going to do is you want to make sure, first of all, that it's straight and it's in a position that you like before you start kind of trying to work it down. And for me, I'm just going to place it down so I know. And if you're really bad like me, you can also take a tape measure, just like what I did with the decals, because you've got time to move this around. And you can kind of pick a couple spots on the design and sort of see where you are in how straight it is. Okay, so it's actually pretty good. Okay, and then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the center, and I'm going to start working those bubbles out and those creases. And once you've kind of got it where you're happy with it, you just take a paper towel and kind of dry it. As before, I'm using my lid to help line up where the center of my design is going to be. If you remember in my last tutorial with the skull damask, I kind of showed you guys how I do my decals, and I did show you my tip where I fold my image in half. Not all images require that. This one here, I have this little centerpiece of my flourish on the bottom that is perfectly center, so I'm going to use that as my center point on my design. And as always, I use the hinge method. I just kind of cut my paper backing in half, being careful that I'm only cutting the paper backing. I'm not accidentally cutting my transfer tape or my decal. Especially when it comes to a curved surface, your best way of doing this is to cut as close to your decal as possible. It will help make it easier to lay your design flat. So I'm just going to cut around here first and move that to the side. And then I'm going to take my tumbler and I'm going to kind of measure, sort of eyeballing it, my center part of my design with the center part of the mouthpiece here. Bring that down a little bit. And for me, the easiest way that I can tell and guarantee that my design is on there equal and even is by taking a measuring tape and measuring two different spots. I'm going to move this down a bit. I want it to be about measuring two different parts of the design to kind of see that it's level and even. I'm going to hold my thumb so I don't accidentally shift my design, pull back half of it, and right in the center, press it down. I'm going to work from the center out. My biggest concern right now is that my vinyl is laying flat. I'm not concerned about my transfer tape laying flat. So I'm going to go over only where my vinyl is, and I'm going to push it out. And if you get little creases in your transfer tape like there, it's not a big deal. As long as the vinyl underneath is not wrinkled, you're not going to notice that. So I've got that pressed down. That's good. Now I'm going to pull back, and I'm going to start in the center out. Again, you can see here my transfer tape is puckered, but my vinyl is flat, so I'm not concerned about it. Now, if you're having a situation here where no matter what you're doing, you cannot get your vinyl to lay flat because your transfer tape is puckering, what you do is you pull back your transfer tape on the other part of your design, which is already laying flat, making sure you're not accidentally lifting anything. And then once you've released it enough off of that design, you can press it down. And now it's not wrinkled. If I would have kept pushing it there, I would have had a puckered vinyl piece there. So that's that part. Now, just because I'm a little bit OCD about things, I'm just going to measure again. And it's good. Okay, one of the reasons why I do an offset, not just because in some cases it's going to make it easier to read, especially if you have multiple colors on your background and they're switching, like transitioning from light to dark, but it's also because when I'm using multiple different colors for my decal, it's a great way to make sure that it's going to be lined up and even and properly placed and spaced. So what I'm going to do now, just so you know, this green color here is a bright green holographic vinyl, which I got from Script Design. I'm just laying it over a black vinyl, which I also get from Script Designs. They are located out of Quebec and they're really great. So I'm just kind of placing it over the black without pressing it down, and I'm kind of just twisting it and turning it until I like the outline that I'm seeing. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. And I'm going to do the same with the Swash. You're going to push it down really well with your thumb. And then when I peel back, I'll start from the other side. When I peel back, I'm going to go pull it right up against the tumbler like this. I'm not lifting it up and away. I'm just gliding it along. And then there's that part. I will do the same for Overkill. The Overkill is in the red metallic vinyl. So now I've got my gold metallic foil vinyl, my little flourish on the bottom. So now I have my Christmas Overkill, and I'm loving how it turned out. So what I'm going to do next is now I'm going to seal it with the quick coat. I'm also going to use quick coat over my holographic vinyls. I find that the metallic foil vinyls can lift. They're more likely to lift under epoxy if you do not seal them first. So I use 2 coats of quick coat. I also use quick coat on top of my bottom sticker. I Okay, so with the bottom stickers, I've had a few questions as well. People want to know where I print them. I have on my Etsy shop as well, and I will link it, care instructions, which are in a circle for the bottom of a tumbler. And I've left the center open so that you can put your own logo in the middle. Because I was aware that I wanted to put my logo on the bottom of a tumbler, when I designed it, I wanted to do it in a way that wouldn't be too imposing, wouldn't really be conflicting with styles of other tumblers that I was doing, with something that, you know, a man and a woman wouldn't mind having on it. So I was kind of aware when I was designing my logo how I wanted to do that, but I still wanted to make sure that it represented me, and I like how it kind of turned out in the end. I do two types. I have the black with the transparent backing, and I also have a white with a transparent backing, which I use on my dark cups. I'm just trying to get it off the backing paper here to show you. There we go. So you can see there is the white one. Most printers do not print white. If you have one that prints white, you are really lucky. I really wanted one, but they're very expensive. So I just send my artwork to a place to have it printed. I use Sticker App. I used to use Sticker Mule. And I'm not even sure what size these are. I made them a little bit smaller because I have some smaller tumblers. These are 1.5 inches. So I used to have 2 inches, but I made them a little bit smaller because I had some that they were too big for the bottom of the tumblers. I don't really use those ones anymore, but I still like this size because it's not super imposing, and it can still be read. So I like that. These are waterproof, so you can choose to put them under epoxy like I do, or you can put them over epoxy and they can be removed by your customer if that's what you want, if you want to give them that option. For me, I'm of the school of thought that it is my art. I want to have my logo on it, also for future reference. If they want to know where they got it but they couldn't remember, they can just look on the bottom and my logo is there. Also, I wanted to make sure that my care instructions were under there, so that way they are always aware and there's no excuse for improper care of the tumbler. They can never say that they didn't know. It's on the bottom of the tumbler. Because these are waterproof though, they also do repel epoxy. So make sure I do 2 good coats of quick coat on them, sometimes 3 if I have to do 3 because I'm using something that maybe needs that 3rd coat. Today I'm just going to do the 2 coats. So I'm going to put quick coat again on my entire tumbler using the Taklon brush because it produces or eliminates brush strokes. And then I'm going to put 1 coat of epoxy on this. See, I've already got a piece here wanting to stick up, so I definitely need to seal this before I put it on epoxy. Then I'm going to put 1 coat of epoxy on this, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you how I do my drips using CCDIY's Nice and Thick. Our Christmas Overkill Queen is almost done. Our next step is going to be to add the drips. So I've got epoxied over the water slide that we put on and epoxied over the decal that I put on the back. Now I want to add some drips, and originally, like I said, my plan was to make this like a hot chocolate drip cup, and it was actually to recreate this cup for this tutorial, but we took a veer somewhere. So traditionally what I do when I'm making my drips, and I'm using, just so you know, CCDIY Nice and Thick, which is right here. This is what the bottle looks like. Is I color my drips with the color dispersion in rustic oak. And this stuff is recommended, I believe, because it is very thin, it is very fluid, so it doesn't really affect the consistency of the thickness of the drips once you have mixed however much Nice and Thick in to get the thickness that you want. And you're going to kind of see what I mean by that in a minute. But experience shows that when I add a thicker additive like a glitter or something like that, it does continue to thicken the epoxy. So I'm a little bit nervous because it's my first time that I'm going to be coloring my drips without using something like the dispersion color, where it's not really going to affect the thickness of the epoxy. I'm concerned that if I make this too thick and then I add this, that it's going to become way too thick and they're not going to be very good drips. I'm also concerned that I do the other way, where I kind of don't compensate for it enough and I leave it too runny and then I add the glitters in and it ends up being too runny. So we're going to see kind of how we go. So I prefer a thicker drip. So when I'm doing it, I'm going to be adding more nice and thick than maybe some other people will. For me, when I see the thinner, runnier drips, it just looks like, and this is all personal preference, but to me that looks more like a cup that I want to clean, whereas these thicker, goopier drips look like a drink that I want to eat. So that's sort of where my mindset is when I'm doing this. So I've changed how I want to color my drips as well, in terms of the colors I want to use. This has been a very, very Christmassy color cup, and I want to continue with that color theme. So I'm going to be coloring them with green, red, and gold. So my gold is going to be Champagne Dreams from Cat Glitter Factory, Candy Apple Red from Cat Glitter Factory, as well as a green I got as a sample, which was not labeled. I have no idea what this is called. I'm sorry. I wish I knew. I'll maybe check with Amy. She might know, but she might be able to give me a color that's close to this one, so I can link that in the tab as well. Or sorry, in the description section as well. I was going to use Dorothy's Shoes. It's my favorite red. However, all of my other cuts are an extra fine, and I want to keep the same cut for glitter just to keep it consistent across my drips. So I'm going to be using Candy Apple Red instead of the Dorothy's Shoes color, because I only have Dorothy's Shoes in a fine cut. But this is a lovely red as well. So the first thing, oh sorry, just so you know, the way I kind of wanted to lay this out is I'm going to be doing green, gold, red, gold. So I sectioned my tumbler into 4 sections on the top. First of all, I used the handle and right across from the handle. Then I used the center part of the nose. Usually the center part of this design would be right across from the center part of the back design. However, if you remember, the poinsettia in the design kind of made the center of the nose off center because it kind of sticks out a little bit further, and I wanted to center this more with the nose. So I used this more as a center line to the nose, and I did this as a center to my flourish here. So I kind of kept it center more to my decals than I did to the actual tumbler itself, but I think it's going to look better that way, in my opinion. The first thing I need to do is I need to mix up some epoxy. I'm going to mix up a total of 25 milliliters. That is more than what I'm going to need, but because I'm separating it by color, and also because I'm adding the thickening agent, I want to make sure that I have more than I need, because I can't just quickly mix up another batch to add to it, especially if I'm trying to match consistency. So I'm going to be mixing up 25 milliliters. So my first step is going to be to mix my epoxy. So I'm just using my little measuring cup, and I'm going to start, I always start with part B because it's thinner. And I just transfer my my stuff into barbecue bottles that I got off of Uline, pop the cap back on, and I warm part A in a warm water bath. And just so you know as well, I put it in a stainless steel tumbler. And the reason why I do that is because this will retain the heat better. Even though it doesn't have the lid on, it will still retain the heat better than another dish. And it's actually the right shape for what I'm using as well. And so it kind of gives me more time that I can walk away, and I don't have to worry about, you know, my water cooling down and then my epoxy cooling down too fast. So that's kind of a little tip for you. I was sent the 30-ounce standard curve by accident from my supplier instead of the modern curve, so I was clearing them, and I had one come in with a broken lid, and I thought, you know what, I will use that for my water bath. And now I'm going to put in part A. And by warming it, I'm really thinning part A. I'm making it a lot easier to both get out of my bottle, to measure, and also to mix it. So CCDIY calls for a mixing time of 3 minutes. So I'm going to take my metal mixing spoon, and I'm going to do that now. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to transfer my mixed epoxy into a paper cup. You want to make sure that your paper cup isn't lined with anything that will cause your epoxy to repel, like a wax or something. My next step is going to be to start adding in the nice and thick. So just so you know, this bottle does come with quite a bit in it. I don't know if what I expected when I saw the bottle in the package. Maybe I thought it was going to be a paste or something, but I definitely expected it to be a lot heavier than what it was, and almost hit myself in the face when I pulled it out of the box because I used a lot more strength than what was necessary. So just, if you don't have it, there's a little PSA for you. So I just used a small spoon. It's a plastic spoon I got from the dollar store, and I scoop in a full spoonful. And then I'm going to take my silicone stir stick or spatula, and I'm just going to start mixing it in. And you're going to notice when you're mixing this in that there are going to be some clumps. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to work those clumps out. And it's not hard to do. You just have to keep going at it, be a little bit patient. And you're going to gradually mix in the amount of nice and thick that you want to achieve your desired thickness. But what you want to make sure is before you add more that you've worked out all of the clumps of the nice and thick in there. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just kind of scrape some up against the wall to help break the clumps up, and then mix them in again. Kind of scoop some out and look at it, see if it has any clumps in it. And when you don't see them anymore, you can add in some more nice and thick. So at first, you're going to be able to add in a lot more without it thickening too much. But as it starts to thicken, you'll need less and less. So again, because I know that I like the thicker drips, I'm definitely generous with my first scoops. Because I'm so generous with my first scoops, it might take me a little bit longer to break down all of the little powdery clumps. And then as you go, you can just lift your stirring device, be it a spatula, popsicle stick, whatever it is that you're using. You can just mix it out or pop it out and kind of see how runny it is. When you think you're starting to get a consistency that you like, test it on the inner rim of your cup. So I can see that that is just running right down the side of my cup still. So that's definitely too thin for me still. And the reason why I'm adding the nice and thick first, other than the reason, like, even though I'm, like, okay, one of the reasons why is because I'm using 3 different colors. So I wouldn't be able to mix all 3 in at the same time. But my main reason is because I'm concerned that if I had the glitter already in here, it would be harder to break down those clumps. So I would say I'm probably almost to where I need to be. And because of the fact that I'm putting in these solid additives, I'm actually going to start separating it now. So I just have 3 little cups here. I'm going to separate it into the 3 cups. 1 cup is going to have a little bit more than the other 2 because I'm going to be using that color twice, and the other colors I'm only going to be using once. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding my colors. So I will start with my green. So I'm doing 2 things while I'm adding my glitters. I'm checking my coloring, and I'm also checking to see how it it's kind of dripping. And I like that. That's good. Okay, moving on to red. Yeah, so I'm not quite able to cut the cloud. And I'm looking at the other one that's settling to a bit more. And I'm concerned that if I keep adding more that I'm not going to get the enough fluidity in it for my drip. So we're going to, the reason why I'm choosing to add alcohol ink, and I'm using chili pepper from Pinata, which I get mine from Shades of Clay. Yeah, that cut out that cloud. But the reason why I'm using that and not like a paint or an epoxy pigment is because it's translucent. So I'm still going to see my sparkle in there. Also, it has alcohol in it, which does cut some of the thickness of the epoxy. So I just kind of gave myself a little bit more fluidity in my drips again. I have added in the past, I had Rainforest Green from Pinata, and it turned my my stuff blue. So I'm going to use Meadow from Tim Holtz. Just again to kind of cut a little bit of that cloud from the nice and thick. Give me a little bit more of a nicer color saturation. Now we can move on to my gold. I'm using Champagne Dreams. Again, these were all a extra fine cut. You can probably use a thicker cut as well. I'm choosing to use extra fine because it's what I had in 2 of my colors, and I wanted to keep it consistent. I'm going to use the Rich Gold's Pinata color. This one's not translucent. This is more of an opaque color, so we're going to see how this looks. I'm going to add just a small amount at first. There we go. Okay, so as with everything in crafting, you want to work fast. I don't want this to set up too much. So I wanted to do green here. So what I'm going to do, try to do this where you can see it, is I'm going to use these here as my markers for my start and end point. And I'm just going to scoop out some green, and I'm going to put it on the lip of my cup. So right now, all that I want to do is I just want to get from point A to point B, just to kind of mark where it's going on my cup. And that looks good. And now I'm going to start changing it from that horizontal over to vertical. I'm going to just give it a little bit of shape. So you can decide here where you want to have your drips hanging just by kind of bringing it down a little bit more, making it a little thicker there. I'll clean out the inside of my cup before I move on because I dripped in accidentally. I'm just going to have a piece of paper towel ready for that. And I'll just use some acetone to get that out. So now we can kind of see that it's starting to drip down. I'm just going to bring it back to the rim a little bit. All right, so next my color was going to be gold. So I'm going to do the same thing and just kind of mark on my cup where that gold is going. And I've got 2 sections for the gold. I'm doing it on either side of the green. And last but not least, I'm going to add my red. So in areas where I want it to drip lower, I make it a little heavier with the epoxy, because it will encourage it to kind of drip down there. So what I had happen here was I had some red come in. So I'm just going to scrape off that red. Anywhere where you don't like it, you can always come in and remove it. This is runnier than what I usually make my drips. So I was right to kind of worry that I compensated a little too much in one direction. So I'm just going, don't want it to drip into my dishes and contaminate them. So I'm just going to wipe away where I don't want it. So I'm just taking a Q-tip with some acetone, and the drips that just made their way over the rim of the cup while I had it upside down was cleaning up the cup. I'm just cleaning those off. Okay, so overall, I'm happy with this. There's just a couple more spots I'm just going to clean up, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put it on my turner, and I'm going to let it turn there for a while, and that's where it's going to finish setting up. And while it's on my turner, I'm going to have both hands available, and then I can clean up a little bit some of the areas where it dripped that I didn't really want it to, like on the handle, and kind of fix that up a little bit. I had my tumbler spinning yesterday just for a few hours. I think it was, I think I left it on for 3. That was longer than what it needed with the CCDIY because it was already set up. I use the CCDIY medium viscosity resin. So basically what I did after I put it on the turner was I just cleaned it up. I used just some water. I kind of found that when I was cleaning it with acetone, it was making the epoxy that was already on here a little bit sticky. So I went back and I cleaned up some of the areas with just some water once the acetone had sort of, once the epoxy had rehardened. And what I'm going to do now, these are fully set, they're dry, they're hard. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start my final coat process for the epoxy. And I wanted to show it to you because it does have the drips on it this time, so it has that little bit of extra texture, as well as the handle, which can complicate things just a little bit for some people. So I've got my epoxy here, it's mixed. You see it's super, super bubbly. I have really bad bubble making habits. I don't stir gently at all. So I'm just basically going to use my finger to take some out. I start with my handle, always making sure that I am doing full coverage around. Then I will take some and put it underneath the handle and go back up. Also, just so you know, I did fully clean my rim before doing this as well. So I just used an X-Acto knife to kind of pop off or cut off any epoxy that kind of went over the edge, which I didn't have really any of because I had cleaned it with the acetone and the Q-tip already last time. So now that I've got this section here done, I'm going to turn on my turner and continue applying. So when I'm doing my final coat, I do it with a flood coat. My first coat of epoxy to go on here is going to be very thin because I don't want it to be too thick on that final coat. That way, if something does happen to that final coat, I can still do another one after that and it won't like be the end of the world. And make sure you get your bottoms. So once I've got full coverage, I'm just going to go with my finger from bottom to top, make sure I haven't missed any parts, kind of go around the handle one more time, make sure I don't have any buildup of epoxy, bottom to top. Making sure that I'm just kind of coming right up and over, that I'm not missing anything. I'm pulling away before I'm getting on that exposed stainless steel, but I am just bringing it up and over. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of come right around that rim here. Because my drips were thinner than what they usually were, it's not quite as 3D, the drip effect, as what I've had in the past. But right now I'm just kind of making sure that I'm not having a buildup of epoxy right around that drip section. All right. So that's it. I only mixed up like 10 milliliters and like total, and you can see that I still have like plenty left. So what I will do next is I'll torch it. And if you've seen some of my videos in the past on how to do a final coat, I discuss using the propane. I'm going to remind you guys again to be careful, especially when you're working with CCDIY. I'm not as familiar with the other epoxies out there. Art resin was this way too, so I'm assuming it's kind of universal. Do not over torch. And what I mean by over torch is don't get the fire too close. You don't want to scorch it. I really, especially since I've switched to the propane, I go over it once and then I will let the epoxy cool for 5 minutes before coming over and doing it again. The reason for that is because if you add too much heat, it will start to cause divots or fisheyes in your epoxy. So you want to be aware of that. So I'm just going to turn my torch on and do a very fast sweeping motion, not getting too close and not concentrating on any area for too long, and only going over it once. I'm going to give it a chance to come around. Slower turner. Okay. Now that I've done that, I'm going to take a Q-tip and some acetone. You don't need a lot, just a little bit. And I'm going to take my Q-tip just right around my edge here, and I'm just going to clean up any epoxy that maybe got onto the rim. So that way I don't have to worry about epoxy being up and over the edge of my tumbler, having to cut it away with a knife, potentially breaking a seal. I don't want any of that to happen. And the reason why I torched first is because acetone is flammable. And I know I'm just using a tiny amount and that it does absorb, it dissipates very, very quickly, but I still would rather do the flames first before adding my flammable substance, just for safety. So I'm going to let that turn for 5 minutes. Then I will do one more time with the torch, and then I'm going to let it turn for, it's pretty warm in here. I have it about 24 degrees Celsius in my workshop. I'm a cold fish, I like to be warm. So also this type of resin really likes the warmth. So in about 3 hours, I will come back and I will do a flood coat. I got a little bit busy with some other things. It's actually been 4 hours since I did my first coat. However, I'm still well within my flood coat window. So I just stopped my turner right now just so I can apply the epoxy on the handle. I like having a little bit more control. I've gimmicked my my turner arm so that I can kind of rotate this whenever needed. So I mixed up 25 milliliters of epoxy. This is way more than what I'm going to need, but I'm going to use the leftover for a mold. As always, I would rather have too much epoxy than not enough. And because I like control, I always will sort of scoop a little bit out first before applying it. Because this is a little bit more set up, It's not as sticky as it would have been an hour ago. And I'm just going to follow the same process, starting with my handle, going around the sides of my handle. But one of the big differences is I'm not putting as much pressure on because that bottom coat of epoxy is still very, very tacky. So when I pulled my tumbler off of my turner and I kind of did a final inspection, I felt like it wasn't quite extra enough. It wasn't enough overkill. So what I want to do is I want to add a couple of crystals to it. Usually if I'm adding crystals, I would have put it in my final coat of epoxy. So that would have been the flood coat, and I would have put it on about an hour after I put that last flood coat on. And then that way the epoxy is still wet, so I could apply the crystal, but it is set up enough that the crystal wouldn't just kind of slide out of place. However, in this case, I did not think of it until after the fact. So I am going to be using an epoxy glue instead. So this is Gorilla epoxy glue. This should be strong enough to adhere to a smooth surface as long as it's oil-free. So I cleaned it off with some 99% rubbing alcohol before I'm going to be doing this step. Basically, when you're using this product, what you first want to do is you kind of want to squeeze together. Of course, I don't have a thing here, so it's just going to make a little bit of a mess. Squeeze together to get the air out, and then you're going to mix an equal portion, part A and part B, into a little cup. And it comes with a little cap. You just cap it, and then just take a little popsicle stick, and you mix these in together for about 20 seconds. Okay. And then what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to scoop a little bit up on my stick. So I've got some. I'm just going to take I have a Crystal Katana tool. I use this for picking up my stones. If you don't have something like this and you're looking for something to grab it, crayons work too. Not quite as well as this tool does, but they do work well as well. And you have about 5 minutes. This sets in about 5 minutes. You got about 5 minutes to play with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my tool and I'm going to pop my gem into my adhesive, slide it off. Oops. It's my big stone too, and it's already giving me problems. Okay, I'll do that one more time, make sure I have enough adhesive on the back. Okay, and then I'm just going to place it on my poinsettia. I'll use the back of my tool to just push it down and set it. And then in about 5 minutes, that will be set. I probably won't disturb it for a half an hour or so. And then I'm using for the other side, I have this very tiny SS3 stone. And I'm going to do the same thing. Dip it in my adhesive, place it on, and press it into place. Okay, and then that will be set in about 5 minutes. And I think it just adds that little bit of extra to an already very extra tumbler, which is exactly what I'm looking for in my overkill design. One of the things I did want to mention really quickly about the Gorilla epoxy glue, I do realize that it is a toxic product. How toxic it is after it fully cures, I cannot say, but because I am not doing this at a portion of the tumbler where someone's drink or beverage, food, or mouth is going to be coming into contact with. It is low enough in my design. I do feel fine and comfortable putting it on there. If you are concerned about that, you could always use Liquid Fusion, which is a clear urethane adhesive. However, this might not hold as long because it's supposed to be more on like a porous surface than on a slick surface like unsanded epoxy is. That being said, your best bet and your safest bet, like your strongest bet, is always going to be just to put it in that final coat of epoxy. I decided a while back that I was going to be keeping this tumbler for myself. If this was one that I was putting up for sale, I would have probably done the extra coat of epoxy. Because I'm keeping it for myself and I know what I've used on the product, I'm comfortable using this as my adhesive. Just wanted to put that disclaimer out there for you guys.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please leave it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, please click my logo to subscribe and tickle that little notification bell so you'll be notified of any future videos I post. I will be trying to release one new tutorial each month. Thanks again, and I'll be back for more Tumbler tips and tutorials.